Hello, my name is Gil Barrows. I'm a government relations consultant based in Ottawa. My company is called Vox Public Affairs, and I do work with the National Trust for Canada, and they've asked me to give a video about effective government relations for advocates in the heritage sector. And what I intend to cover today is a few points. First, planning is number one, setting out your objectives, figuring out what your strategy is and what your tactics are. Second is communication with government, keeping it clear, succinct, and understandable. And third, follow-up with government. So the first step is planning, and I'm a big fan of thorough planning because it can save you an awful lot of time in the long run. Number one is your objective. You have to figure out exactly what the objective is. And number two, is it attainable? And don't confuse strategy and tactics with objective. Some people will say, well, the objective is to meet the minister. Well, no, that's not the objective. The objective is to get a regulatory change or get a pool of funding for your project. Getting to the minister might be a tactic you want to employ, but if a middle-level public servant can solve the problem for you, you don't need to meet the minister. So, is that objective clear and obtainable in a reasonable amount of time? If it's not, you're going to have to do some adjusting. Now, your strategy, if we take the example that the National Trust for Canada is working on, shovel-ready heritage projects. And that's because there is a whole wall of money coming from the federal government for infrastructure, literally billions and billions of dollars. And you want to try to figure out whether you can leverage the government's agenda to get part of that for a heritage plant, for a heritage project. And some of the ways you can do that is to leverage the government's own agenda. We know, for instance, that jobs are really, really important to all levels of government. And we're talking about government relations at the federal, provincial, or municipal level. So jobs are big. We know that the environment is big. And we also know that on the green agenda, the greenest building is the existing building. Not one that you tear down and start over with, but the existing building. We know that in addition to jobs and environment, that Aboriginal issues are big on many governments' agendas. And if there's a way to leverage that, so much the better. Another example would be tourism. We know that domestic tourism is a job creator, and we know that people who are interested in heritage tend to be older, and they tend to spend more time with their visits, and that means they're spending more time in restaurants, more times in hotels, and that's good for local business. So you've done your planning, and the next step is how are you going to use that planning? And the usual thing is meeting government, and that is a matter of figuring out who to meet, and the person to meet, or persons to meet rather, are the people who are the decision makers. So you need to find out where the money lies in the government. Now, the infrastructure money is coming from the federal government, going to the provinces with some general parameters around it. And the provinces will decide what sort of infrastructure is important for them. And the municipalities may be involved as well. So you've got those three levels to target, and you need to figure out, okay, who are we going to meet and make our arguments with? So you've figured out who you want to target for meetings. Now you want to get the meetings. And my preferred way of doing that is just a simple email request. Like in the title of the email, just put meeting request. Then simply explain who you are, what your organization is, the rationale for the meeting, and you may suggest some times and dates that would work. at this point, you're not explaining the whole project. This should be a very short thing that goes to somebody like a scheduling assistant for a member of parliament or a member of a provincial assembly, or someone in the mayor's office, for instance. You're not putting the whole argument forward, it's just the meeting request. Okay, you've arranged your meeting. Now, the thing is, how do you conduct the meeting? And the top thing to remember is the time constraints that people are under, particularly at the elected officials level. Meetings are generally 30 minutes. Now, you should confirm that before you start the meeting. Just ask politely how long the person has. And then you should keep in mind that if you have 30 minutes, what you have to cover is, say, 5 minutes for introduction and some pleasant chit-chat, 10 minutes for you to present, 10 minutes for dialogue with the person and their questions, and then 5 minutes to wrap up. So you can see you have very little time to present. For instance, a typical thing is to use a PowerPoint presentation to present, and that means 5, 6, maybe 7 slides at the most. And you don't want to talk for 30 minutes. You want to definitely set aside time to listen and answer questions and try to get a dialogue going, because that's what will lead to a good outcome. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how not to present. Clarity is very, very important. And the first example is from Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense when the United States moved into Iraq looking for weapons of mass destruction. And when the media asked Donald Rumsfeld to explain why he didn't find weapons of mass destruction, here's his answer to that. And I'm going to read it because it's a bit convoluted. So Donald Rumsfeld said, quote, "As we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know that there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things that we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know. Now, Mr. Rumsfeld's logic is solid, but the message is so confusing that the story became not what the known unknowns or unknown knowns and the known unknowns. The story became that he came across as not communicating very well. What he could have said very clearly was, look, we did our homework before we went into Iraq. We looked at all the knowledge that was available, and then we went to the next step, which was, what are the things we don't know? And we prepared contingencies around that. What we couldn't know until we got there were the unknowns, and that is the most difficult thing to deal with. Now, the second example I was going to present is a graphic of a PowerPoint. And when you see this graphic, you can see that it communicates nothing but confusion. Your graphics should be very simple, very uncluttered, and just get the message across. I recall one time I organized a conference, and one of the speakers was a senior executive from McDonald's restaurant company. He, on some slides, had 2 words, and those 2 words got the message across in a way that you could remember. And that's very important. When you're communicating, people have to remember what you said. Those people are not going to take your PowerPoint presentation or your briefing note and carry it around with them. What you want them to do is to have the message in their head so that they can talk to other people. Someone might say, that's a good idea. I think I'll talk to the minister about that. I think she may be interested. But they're not carrying, they need to have that message in their head. They're not carrying your briefing note around. So you're coming to the end of your meeting. You've made your ask. What we need to figure out at that point is, what are the next steps? Because it doesn't end with the meeting. That's just hopefully the start of something bigger. And are there outstanding questions that need to be answered? That's fine. That's just that's another opportunity for dialogue. If you can't answer the question, just say so and say, look, we'll get back to you. If you aren't clear what the next steps are, you just ask, okay, what do we do next? What do you do next? What do you want us to do next? And then make sure you follow up on that and persist in that. Now, just to summarize what I've said today, planning is number one, very important. If you've got an objective that's clear and achievable in a reasonable time frame, you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches and work in the long run. Your strategy, hopefully, will leverage the government's own agenda, and follow-up is very, very important. Be persistent, and you can have some success. Now, as a parting thought, I will wish you, people in the heritage advocacy sector, good luck. And I remember what Abraham Lincoln said about good luck. He said, I'm a great believer in good luck, and I find the harder I work, the more luck I have. So good luck to you.